Happy Thursday to everyone. I don't know if anyone's a history buff and follows those, what happened today kind of in history calendars, but I always mean to get that into the morning routine. It's always interesting to find out what happened on this day in history. In lieu of that, though, we're going to start with a quick warm-up poll, which is just a check-in about how you're feeling about your project. We started earlier on with a word cloud poll about how you're feeling generally, how you're feeling at the moment. But today's word cloud is about how you're feeling about your project specifically, in a word or phrase. You'll see the link in the chat, and you can take a moment and gather your thoughts or feelings and drop a word into that word cloud, and then we'll show you the results shortly. And while we are assembling, waiting for a couple of additional folks to join us, just a quick preview of what's ahead today. We're going to spend the first hour getting things done, working on refining our thinking, some hands-on time, some collaborative time, some breakout time with colleagues, some discussion time here as a group, and then in the second part of the session, we're going to hear from Dan Oshinsky after a little break. So Dan is a guru of all things newsletters, but really all things product, all things creator. He's really got some terrific examples to bring today and in the subsequent session on Tuesday. And lots of insight, lots of intelligence, lots of expertise, lots of experience on this. He's a funny guy, he's a smart guy. He's got a lot of very practical ideas and insights to share. So I'm really excited that Dan will be back for the second hour. And that's our agenda overall for today. So those of you just joining, there's a poll question, a warm-up poll question, word cloud kind of check-in question. So take a moment and share your word or phrase, and then I will share screen. We're almost at a good number of respondents. Okay, we only got 10 responses though so far, so I'm curious if anyone's having difficulty seeing the link, or should be pretty straightforward. Maybe you're having trouble thinking. Oh, here's the link one more time. Okay, so let me share screen. So this is what we're seeing. I guess you see it once you've entered your answer, you'll see it on screen as well, I guess. But so encouraged, contemplative, empowered, success, inspired, sustainability, anxious, enthusiastic, ready, progressing, and then still confused, which is slightly larger, which indicates maybe more than one person has that feeling, which is totally, it's all good. Whatever you're feeling, it's all good. Excited, good, not in the sense that it's a good thing, but it's, there are other people with you. There's plenty of time left ahead for us. Excited is a big one here. Intrigued, indecisive, in flux. Okay, those are really interesting terms. So hopefully this next hour, the first hour, but then also actually the second hour in many ways as well, will help nudge things forward in your mind, make you feel, oh yeah, actually, what about this? Or this might actually work, or this might be how I can resolve that bit of indecision or unsureness, uncertainty. Or this is something that will that I can build on, given my inspiration, or given my success so far, or given my feeling of being empowered, or given my feeling of being ready, or of being on this roller coaster. So yeah, so thanks for sharing those thoughts. We're going to move things along because we want to do a number of things today. And primarily, one of our key objectives is to give you a chance to think through some of the things and wrestle with some of the things. We just to step back for a moment and give you a meta picture of our approach. We want to give you a lot of guidance in terms of insights, frameworks, case studies, examples, tactics, right? And that's where the practitioners come in, people like Dan, who we'll hear from today, and the guidance you heard from Umbreen, for example, the other day. We also want to balance that, though, with an opportunity to process that and digest that and synthesize that and bounce that off of colleagues and sort of wrestle with how that applies in your particular case and in particular question. So that's the balance that we're aiming for, and that's why we kind of have both of these kinds of activities and approaches, so that you're not overwhelmed with just people sharing content with you consistently, or just discussion. There's aiming for a balance, and we're happy to take your feedback, consistently about where we are with that balance. I want to turn to Umbreen for the next little bit here.
Thanks, Jeremy. So as Jeremy said, we're going to use this first hour to spend a little bit of time working on our deliverables. But before we do that, I did want to just kind of allow a few minutes for us to talk about any sort of things that have come up as you're, both from Tuesday's session and from working on your deliverables, and then also the discussions that we've been having in Slack. It was really cool this week just to see kind of the conversation continue in Slack after class. I think that's a great way of kind of extending, the thinking that we're doing around these things. So I really appreciate the thoughts that Gabriella, Manon, Mike, Lindsay, and Ashlyn shared on social media and kind of good social strategy. There were a couple really good ideas in there, and a conversation just sort of about, is it okay to just be producing only on social media? Gabriella, you had some great thoughts on that, as well as on how whether it's important to have a dedicated person doing social, or it's something you can weave into your work week, especially as solopreneurs. That's a big challenge for us. So some great ideas there, and we can keep having that conversation in that space along with others. But for now, you have another week before your first deliverable deadline. And I did want to mention that because we'll be providing you some feedback through your mentorship meetings in class. You need to turn in your deliverable before class on Thursday. But with that in mind, kind of what's one question that you're considering about the deliverable or about the research that you're doing that's top of mind for you right now? We can have a couple people share live if you want, or you can drop it in the chat. Maybe we can hear from somebody who said they were still confused. And I do want to mention that, with the research, I know it can feel really overwhelming, but this isn't about being kind of exhaustive or comprehensive in doing all the possible research that you could do. Obviously, that would take a lot more time than what we have here allotted for this. So the idea is just to kind of get started so that doesn't become, another thing that you can't get to, right? So it's the idea is to get you started and get you going and help you make a little bit of progress. And even a small amount of progress can help you get pretty good insight. And it's a good gut check for what you're building. So any questions? Anybody want to share a question that's top of mind for them right now?
I guess I have a question. I know, I was looking through the slides yesterday, and you're supposed to sort of make a timeline for like when you're gonna finish your research and then make whatever next step that you need to make. And I guess I was wondering how you decide when you have enough. Like when it's time to kind of close the survey or stop talking to people and start moving on to the other process. Because I made up some dates, but it felt really arbitrary.
Yeah, there's obviously no hard or fast way of doing that, right? And Jeremy, you can chime in here as well. But I think it has to do with kind of a lot of factors, including your timeline for needing to make those decisions, right? And I think you mentioned you had like 80 plus survey respondents. So you've got a good sample size already. So maybe that feels like when you look at what you're hearing from the surveys, like maybe you feel like you have enough insight now to action upon it. And so that's the reason why you decide that you're done. Or maybe it's because you're hitting, kind of whatever date that you felt like you needed to kind of launch or do whatever. And so you just do that. So there's a couple different factors, I think. And also, I think it's okay to leave your survey open and have those insights continue to come in and use that as a way to refine what you're doing, but also get going. I don't think you need to kind of like wait 3 months and then like digest the information and then move to the next step, like kind of moving on parallel tracks is helpful. Jeremy, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, quick thought to add is that I think of this increasingly as a quarterly process and a twice annual kind of process, meaning that like quarterly, and I'm thinking of it kind of in terms of the seasons, like I want to have at least some conversations with people. And in this case, I'm talking about my newsletter, but I would apply this in other kinds of projects as well, where like I want to talk to a few people, get a few kind of ideas or insights in terms of what's resonating or what might not be resonating, or how people are using whatever it is, or how they're actually reading it or whatever. So those individual interviews on a quarterly basis, and even just a handful of them. And then on a twice annual basis, if not annually, a more comprehensive survey across the readership. So that like any one instance of it is really just like a snapshot of this moment in time with some insights coming from that, but it's not kind of like the permanent research. It's kind of like, I mean, I guess at the foundational level, it could be more extensive than it is at the quarterly or twice annual or annual basis. In other words, you can't necessarily do a fully comprehensive thing every single, quarter, certainly, or even every single, twice a year moment. But I do think that we all probably need to do this periodically, basically, is I guess what I'm really saying. And at different levels of depth, right? So the Josh Spector has talked about this in terms of his own surveying, where it's really like a few core questions. What should we do more of? What should we stop doing? What the sort of like the sort of big picture feedback kind of questions. And then maybe more longer in-depth interviews just for a smaller group of people. But doing that kind of like on a quarterly or twice annual basis. That's the way I'm thinking about it. And so in terms of when to move on, I think if you feel like there are a number of insights that you've gained and you see patterns and you see these insights and you see ways to apply them, like I think that's a good signal that like, okay, that's a good point to be at, and you can move on.
I think what I've gathered so far is that there's a really big need for something. I'm not 100% clear what that something is, right? Which is what I was doing it's abundant. I'm overwhelmed with responses to my survey. Like it's amazing,
Right.
But everybody's looking for a solution, and it's like, now I need to figure out what the thing is. So I want to keep it open, right? Because I think new ideas will keep coming in, but there's still, I think it's a lot of anxiety of like, okay, I know now that my suspicion that the community needs something is in fact true. Yeah. Very, very true. But what actually can I do is sort of the next step. So some of that I haven't read into the essay part of the survey. I just have sort of scanned the like multiple choice ones. So that'll maybe inform some of it, but it's a scary step. Feels like a big scary step.
For sure. I do think there are people who do a secondary approach where it's like, okay, first thing, and then like, okay, from this, I'm clarifying these are 3 kind of core directions I can go in. Help me prioritize those and sort of pick some subgroup or pick some way of doing that, where you kind of have these clear options and give people, kind of give people an opportunity to weigh in on prioritization in some way, or give you feedback on which feels more urgent to them, or which they'd be more excited to participate in or volunteer in, or in some way collaborate in. And so that could be a way of having a second beat to the process. There's a tool called Opinion X, which I've used in the past, which allows people to do pairwise comparisons. You can say, here's a bunch of topics that I'm thinking about covering, for example, or here are a bunch of features that I may offer as benefits to subscribers, paid benefits. And what it does is it allows people it puts them in front of people in 2 different, they can only choose one or the other. And then they get another choice, another pair. It's a pairwise selection research process, which is something used in like product research for a lot of companies. And you can use it for your own content or your own, strategy in terms of what you're producing. And I find that kind of interesting because if you have enough people responding to it, you actually do get a pretty good view of how people prioritize those different things, whether it's content or benefits or other things you're looking at. So that's a specific kind of research tactic that you can use if it's prioritization or kind of like deciding among things that you want people to do. I'll share a post in the chat that I wrote about it with an example of how I did that research.
Thanks so much. It's really helpful.
Anybody else have a question that they want to share? Go ahead, Domenico. Yeah.
Yes, hello. So I started with a survey which I have a couple, I mean, about 15, 20 responses and some interviews one-to-one. But my problem is with the slide where you have to build a persona, because I received a lot of distinct answers, and so maybe my readers are segmented, my audience is not so clear, and building a persona could be difficult. I don't know if you have a suggestion or a tip about it.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up because we haven't talked that much about personas yet. So one thing is that you can have multiple personas if your audience is segmented. It's okay to have 2 or 3. Obviously, you don't want 10 because then you don't really have clarity around who you're targeting. So that's one thing to mention, and you can definitely duplicate the slide that you have in the deck and do multiple versions. But in terms of just kind of clarifying who your persona is, some of that comes from audience research, but it also comes from the other work that you've done, your value proposition, right? Your value proposition helps you understand better like who the audience is and then what their pains and gains are. And the other thing is your landscape analysis and kind of who you're going after in terms of the product that you're creating. Jeremy, do you want to say anything more about personas?
Yeah, I think sometimes they're overplayed. I think sometimes people focus too much on finding this exact picture. I think the idea is to really have a sense of the context in which people are reading this or listening to this, their lives, the other things they're reading. It's kind of the idea is to have a general sense of like the world in which your reader, viewer, listener is actually living. And I don't think it has to be super precise. I think it's intended to be kind of directionally give you a feeling for how much time are people spending on this, like how important it is, when are they reading it and consuming it, like what else are they consuming, what are the big challenges in their lives, the big issues that are motivating them to look at this or consider this, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I consider it just one kind of little piece of this broader picture of understanding the context in which you're operating.
Great. Thank you.
And then I see a question from Manon about multiple languages for the surveys, and I just put a note in there. I do think that actually it's pretty easy now to translate your survey into multiple languages, and I think there are probably good AI tools for this. Jeremy, I don't know if you have any off the top of your head or if you want to follow up on Slack.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, absolutely agree with that point. The AI makes it super easy to translate the questions, and then the other thing that I would mention, since you brought up the AI thing, is like pasting the results into, if you get a bunch of open text results, you can actually paste that column of text into an AI tool, and it will essentially give you the key takeaways, key insights, which if you have a lot of results, that can be hard to, you should obviously do it manually as well. Like this isn't like in place of reading the actual results, but you can actually get some pretty helpful overall summary, sense of what are people saying, what are the key themes that you're hearing. The thing that we heard from Ariel about sort of like, sifting through and putting them in different columns. So you can definitely do that manually, and that can be a helpful process, but AI can do that really powerfully, and it can translate, the results afterwards and the questions beforehand.
This is great, and we'd love to help in answer any other questions as well. If you want to put them in Slack later, we're available offline as well. And the other thing I wanted to mention today is that as part of your, when you turn in your deliverable, there's a couple ways that you'll get feedback on it. So one is the mentorship meeting next Thursday. You'll have a chance to kind of present your deliverable to your mentors and highlight a couple slides that you want some feedback on and get some direct feedback. You'll also be providing feedback to one another in your learning teams. So that will happen asynchronously. We have a spreadsheet, or a form where you can go in and offer, take a look at the course deck of your other learning team members and then offer feedback. And that doesn't need to be exhaustive, but it's more just sort of, we have a little bit of a guide that'll help you with that. But, just kind of offering your thoughts on and suggestions on their deliverable. And then the last way is that we will have some office hours with Jeremy that you can sign up for. So I'll drop that in the chat now. This is a spreadsheet, and you can just put your name in at the time that you want to meet. There'll be pretty quick meetings. They're in 15-minute increments, so probably 10 minutes and then we'll need to move on to the next person, but it is a chance to meet one-on-one with him. And if you want to just meet with him about something else, that's fine too. It doesn't have to be about your deliverable, but that is kind of time so that you can have some feedback on that. So let's go ahead and move forward then. We are going to have this opportunity to spend, I think it's going to be about 15 minutes, right, Jeremy, for us to work on a segment of your deliverable with other people. So you can choose where you want to go. I'm going to launch a poll here shortly, and you can kind of decide what area you feel like you want to work on. And I think it makes sense to pick something that you have some questions around, because then you'll have that opportunity to talk to other people that are working on that same part, or maybe have questions about the same part as well. So this is broken up by slides. I don't know if that's helpful, but also just sort of themes. So you can read those and then decide where you want to go for these 15 minutes.
Is everyone clear on what those options are? Hopefully they're self-explanatory, but if you have a question.
It might help to open your course stack as well and just take a look.
In case it's not clear, the second one from Answers to Insights is really about taking the responses and turning those into actions and decisions and insights that you can use.
I'm just going to give everybody time to respond. I know it takes a minute to kind of pull everything up and decide. Okay, looks like we are almost there. That might be it, right, Jeremy? 17 out of 19 because of the note takers and AI.
I believe so, yeah. And we also, or at least I may jump into a couple of rooms just to chat and check in with folks.
So let's see. I'm going to create breakouts. And then I'm going to just, since we have a lot of people that want to do the clarifying questions and survey, I'm going to break that into 2 rooms real fast. Any questions about what we'll be doing while I do this? Okay, and then Manon, I know you wanted to work on your value prop, but you're the only person, so I don't want to put you in a room by yourself. Is there something else you wanted to work on? Another room?
Next upcoming content is
Content. Okay, great. Thank you for that. All right, so that's pretty evenly split. So I'll go ahead and open up the rooms, and as Jeremy mentioned, we might pop in as well to offer a little bit of help as we go along. All right, here we go.
All right, looks like we have everyone teleported back into this main room. And Dan Oshinsky's here. He's going to be with us in a few moments after a break. Before we get to the break, though, a quick little, oh, and Ryan's got a little friend with him as well. Ryan,
Yeah.
you want to introduce us?
What do you want to say?
Hi.
Hi, your name is
Luke.
Luke, and how old are you?
4.
And you're off from school
Nice to
today,
meet you,
right?
Luke.
Yeah. So I found a
He's gonna
little
go on. That's the only thing.
so they lost inside the playroom. But I found them.
Nice. Well, that's
All right,
great.
you want to go put that with the other Legos?
Yeah.
All right, good.
Children, cats, dogs, other humans or non-humans are always welcome. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, I'm sure lots of Star Wars jokes are happening in your household. Okay, we're gonna do a quick waterfall to get a mini debrief on the conversations you've just had in the breakout in the pairing as well. So what this means is over the next 60 seconds or so, you're gonna type something and then we say go and you click return and we see a bunch of different comments, something that you're taking away from that conversation you just had, a new idea or adjustment you're making or a next step or something interesting that you heard from a colleague. Could be anything that you're taking away from those two conversations you just had in those two breakouts, the paired breakout and the group breakout. So is that a clear instruction, hopefully? Think about a comment, an idea, takeaway, and in about 60 seconds.
Jeremy, do you want to use your countdown
Up it
clock?
in. Oh yeah. Oh right. The little thing. Let's see if I can do that super quick. So you'll see it on the screen if I can do it quickly. And yeah, it can be just a sentence, doesn't have to be a long comment. And it will, do you see that on my screen? Okay, so think about your comment, your takeaway, and don't press return though until this timer goes up, and then we're all gonna add the comment at the same time, if that makes sense, hence the waterfall. Okay, now you can add your comment. Great. Okay, so that's the waterfall. So take a moment to see your colleagues' comments, observations. This is kind of like a silent debrief, so we can move to our break shortly. Okay. Seems like lots of insights. I know there's a question about slide 16 and jobs to be done, and actually Dan will, I believe, be talking about that, so that'll be a good follow-up on that specific question. And yeah, I think let's take our break, right, Umbreen? Anything you want to add before we break?
No, let's take our break and then Dan's gonna be ready to go in the next hour. So
Yeah,
let's take 5
Yeah,
minutes.
Sounds good. Yeah, and key takeaway for me is in this piece is just like progress is just one step at a time. It's not being exhaustive, as Umbreen said earlier, not comprehensive. It's just step-by-step progress. Whatever you do for this first deliverable will be ahead of where you were before that. Hopefully, that's the goal. 5 minutes. See you soon. Welcome back. We are fortunate to have Dan Oshinsky here. I've already told you about Dan. Hopefully you read about Dan. You know his work. So I won't give him a long introduction, except to say that each time I hear from Dan, I learn something new. I see a new example, or I just realize something I hadn't thought about or hadn't thought about in that way. He's someone who has practical experience in building his own venture and also leading other big media ventures, newsletter team at the New Yorker, at BuzzFeed, and consulted with all sorts of big companies, small companies, new companies, old companies, so many different kinds of experiences to bring, and does and shares that experience with so much insight and expertise and humor and goodwill and generosity. So we're delighted to have you here, Dan. Thank you for being here and for continually being such a great contributor to this program and the cohorts that have preceded this one. And we're delighted to have you. And I will cede the floor to you. Thank you for being here and for sharing your expertise and your insight with us.
Of course. Thanks for having me, everybody. Apologies, a little under the weather, so apologies for the sound of my voice. It's a little worse than it usually is, but we'll try to make it through this next hour, make this thing work. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get into it. We've got today, we've got next Tuesday. I want to share a lot about what I've learned, everything I can fit into 3-ish hours of this session about building a successful email strategy. Today, I want to talk about a couple things. One, why I think everybody should start a newsletter. In past CUNY sessions, we've talked a lot, and we will again today and Tuesday about having a newsletter first kind of business, because that's really my background. But I also want to make the case today why everybody, even if newsletter is not your core thing, why you should still have some sort of email strategy. I want to talk about formats that work for email, and we'll talk about identifying the job of your newsletter. So first off, why start a newsletter? Why are newsletters valuable? My newsletter experience, my work in email, is really the result of something that happened, oh goodness, now almost 15 years ago. I took a job at a CBS station in San Antonio, Texas. It was my first job out of college. And I got to work with this amazing team in San Antonio, a news team that had been responsible in the 1980s for the most watched newscast in the United States. 60% of people who were watching the news at 6 p.m. were watching, this is Deborah Knapp of the Eyewitness News team, photo of her in the 80s. Deborah and her colleagues delivered the news. And when I got there, all those years later, I was really amazed by kind of what I saw in San Antonio. San Antonio is a really big, small town. It's 1 million+ people, but it feels like this little place. And you know, our anchors and our staff would be out in the field. San Antonio has lots of parades and events. So our staff would be out there. I'd be out there with them. I was always amazed at how often people would just walk up to people like Deborah and start having a conversation as though they'd known them for years. And I would usually ask, like, you just had a pretty animated conversation with that person. Do you know them? And they'd say, no, but they know us because we're on in the living room. They make space for us every single day. They're eating breakfast, they're watching the news, we're on in the background. They're eating dinner, they're going to bed. We're on in these spaces. They hear our voices, they know us a little bit. They have a relationship with us. And when I got into the email space, what I realized is the inbox is very much a digital living room. It's this really personal space where readers let you in, they let in family and friends and colleagues and maybe a newsletter like yours. But what's really cool about email that makes it different from TV is it's not just a broadcast channel. It's actually a place where you can have a real conversation, where a reader can hit reply and write back to you, where you can talk with them directly. What I love about the relationships, to expand on that a little bit, is because there isn't a single entity, there's not a single algorithm that owns email. It means if you get an email address, you have a chance to build a relationship for a super long time. This was my first newsletter called Tools for Reporters, still going all these years later. Some younger grads at the University of Missouri took it over and are running it. And I've done awesome with it. But I remember when I launched this, I had a couple hundred people on the list, and pretty modest. Similar numbers on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter. And when I would post something to Twitter, nothing would happen. I would post something to LinkedIn, nothing would happen. And I'd send an email to 350 people or 500 people, and I would get dozens of replies. People would write back to me, say, oh, I love that tool. I've tried this. Have you tried that? Hey, I'm going to be in New York next week. You want to get coffee? And what I really realized is because email has that one-to-one relationship, you can lean into that, and you have the chance to truly build relationships with readers for the long haul. There are readers on that Tools for Reporters list who have been on there since the very, very beginning of it, who have a relationship with it and care about it and really know the people behind it, which is super, super cool. It's an unusually powerful tool in that way. Something else that I love is that email is this cross-functional tool. What I mean by that is at Condé Nast, when I worked there, when I was at the New Yorker, we talked a lot about the idea of cross-functional teams. How do we get people from editorial and sales and product and design and consumer revenue? How do we get them all in the room together to work together? And with email, it's unusual in that it touches all parts of the org. I'm doing actually right now an audit for a national newsroom, and I've been having these conversations with a lot of members of their team, a lot of whom aren't necessarily connected to email right now. And they've been asking, like, why did you want to talk to me? It's like, well, if we do this well, if we have success in growing your email list and building out the right strategy, you're going to be involved, because suddenly a larger list, more engagement, we're going to be driving people to events. We're going to be driving people to your membership program. We're going to be thinking about selling ads and newsletters in a way that you all have never done before. So I want to have the conversation now, because you all are going to be coming to the table pretty soon to be a part of this thing. And even for you all, when you look at, that's what it looks like at a, big national organization at, the one person, the indie kind of level, it still has a super important role. We're going to drive traffic. It's going to help us build our audience. It's going to help us build the habit of people reading on a regular basis, and hopefully get them to support our work in the long run, which is super, super fun. And on the revenue side of things, so many orgs, this was the case at the New Yorker. I got hired because they had done some research and realized that the number one way they took casual readers and turned them into paying subscribers is if they were on the newsletter list. I've seen the same thing for big organizations. I've seen the same things for indie organizations, for individual writers. Email is just a super powerful engine to drive revenue. We want to get more readers to read, to engage with the work, to get them to pay, get them to keep supporting the work. Email is super powerful for that. I also think there's value in it, even if email is not your core thing. You don't have to build your entire strategy around a newsletter. Like this on the left, The Newsworthy. It's a really cool podcast that's been going for 7 or 10 years, something crazy like that. It's been around for a long time, daily news podcast. And they have an email that goes out weekly, because what they realized is people who are on the email list tend to convert at much higher rates to members and supporters. Podcast listeners, they need an in-between step. If we're in their ears, that's great, but sometimes they're busy, they're commuting to work, they're not willing to pay at that moment when they're listening. But if we can get them onto the email list and they engage with us in a second kind of way, we might be able to convert them there. It's a great second touch point. It's a great way to convert readers. It's a great way to drive additional engagement. It's also just another owned channel. It's a really, it's a place that you have the relationship, with your audience directly. I love social media and think it's great to be building on one of these algorithmic feeds, YouTube or LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever it is. But as we've seen over the years, they have the audience and they can change the rules. Right now, up in Canada, a couple months ago, the Canadian government passed a new law saying that Google and Facebook, if you want to show news links, well, you're going to have to pay these news organizations every time you show a link in one of the feeds. So Facebook just said, that's fine, we'll just stop showing news content. All of my Canadian clients freaked out because suddenly, well, here was Facebook traffic was going down in terms of referral traffic, but they went from some places, 10% of their traffic, some places 50% of their traffic, to 0 overnight. Well, this is why we've been building the newsletter strategy, because we have the way to reach them directly. We can get to them without one of the feeds in the way. So it's really important to have one of those kind of owned feeds where you can get to readers no matter what happens in the future. As far as products, there's a lot of interesting opportunities out there. You all are probably most familiar with something that looks maybe like this, a traffic driving newsletter. Hey, every day, every week, we're going to be in your inbox. Here's, a lot of news organizations do this. We did this at the New Yorker, did this at BuzzFeed. Sign up for basically any newsroom's newsletter, and you'll see something that they probably have at least one of these. Hey, here's our stories of the day. We're going to drive you back to our website. These are particularly popular with any org that has some sort of paywall. The more you read, you hit the paywall, you're likely to convert. It's not the only thing that's out there, though. Other stuff that you all may want to think about is a potential format for your newsletter. Some sort of destination product where the inbox itself is the destination. We might have links out, but really we're trying to get you to read right here in your inbox. And these look different. There's some, like, I've really been enjoying the Puck newsletters. I pay for these personally. Like, I really like these. Insight and analysis and really smart writers in your inbox on a weekly basis. Sometimes they're products like on the right, this is the Peak. It's a fun one. This is a Canadian business newsletter that looks exactly like Morning Brew. The template, the design, the fact that they have, you know, the stock quotes at the top. It's just for Canadian businesses, not for US businesses. They launched in 2020 and this year grew their list. They grew their list to, actually, I'm not sure how many subscribers they had on the list when they sold, but they sold this year for about $3.5 million US, a 3-year project. They grew it, built an audience, built a loyal audience, built a really nice business and sold it, which is super cool. The reading experience takes place there in the inbox. A lot of destination products are built around a really specific writer or voice. Hannah Raskin came to this program. The food section is a great example. Because of a lot of these new platforms, Beehive, Substack, ConvertKit, that are out there trying to say, hey, here's a way to reach people directly. You can publish as kind of a website experience and a newsletter all at once. You're seeing teams experiment more with these sorts of formats. And they're really fun because let's get our good stuff directly to you. The reading experience right there in a place that you're checking on a regular basis. Other stuff that might be out there for you. Alerts. Depending on the type of newsletter, the type of project you're launching, you may say, it makes sense for us to launch some sort of breaking news alert or top story alert that goes out. For what it's worth, if you do launch something like a breaking news alert in the future, it's me. If you do launch something like a breaking news alert, just be super careful about how you define breaking news. I'll pick on the Philly Inquirer folks because they're a client of mine and I like them and they've made some changes over the years. About a year ago, the Philly Inquirer sent out a breaking news alert that was about a cheesesteak restaurant in Philadelphia was changing their name. And I emailed them and I was like, I know cheesesteaks are a really big deal in Philadelphia, but is this actually breaking news? Is this that important in Philadelphia? Like maybe I'm misreading how Philadelphia is treating this one cheesesteak place. And they're like, no, we just kind of had to send a breaking news alert because we try to send like 2 or 3 of them a day. Like, we may want to change our standards when the goal is we need to send 3 of these a day and not we need to send stories when they are most important, when people have news they need to know. Readers are going to get annoyed in the long run. Alerts can also be used to build habit among readers. I see a lot of organizations, excuse me. A lot of organizations will do what we did at the New Yorker, which is we'll send alerts to try to drive habit. So with the New Yorker alerts, we had this crossword puzzle that we launched. This was in, oh goodness, 2017. And we were at a place where the New Yorker didn't have 100 years of publishing crossword puzzles like the New York Times did. How do we build the habit? We created an alert so people could say, hey, we have a new puzzle, go play it. And what we found was the people who got the alert, who played the puzzle, were super likely not just to subscribe, but to stay subscribed for a long time. It was a great way to build habit and keep readers engaged. Something else you all may want to think about, courses. These are super fun. So these are automated emails, kind of built like a welcome series. So you sign up today, tomorrow, a year from now, you get this series of emails, and they're designed to teach you a new skill, a new lesson, a new habit. They're super fun. You see big orgs, like the Wall Street Journal has done these around finance, cooking. Smaller places have done these around things like this is, I think, Voice of OC in the middle. They did one of these around tomatoes and gardening, way to kind of experiment with new content formats. Super, super fun. They're also not just for lifestyle products. On the right, it's in Oregon, Tucson, Arizona, that built one all around like get to know Tucson. Welcome to the community. They use it to introduce new people to what they're doing and drive them to become members. On the left, the LAist is using these tied to elections. Hey, we'll run these for a couple weeks leading up to election day. So that way, if you're trying to figure out what's on the ballot, we have a newsletter that can help you learn. Super fun. Other stuff that's out there, pop-up products. These are for a lot of places, especially a lot of independent operators. This is sometimes a fun place to start. Like we're going to start with a short run product tied to some sort of event. So On the left, Semaphore has done these tied to Davos. Runs for a week. There's a lot of interest around our coverage. Let's build a newsletter just for that. And then funnel people into something like our daily newsletter. Philly does these around summertime on the Jersey Shore. And you may say, there may be a moment, there may be a thing that you're covering. Hey, it makes sense for us to launch a product just tied to this. The first one of these that I ever did, I'm only semi-embarrassed to say this because it was back in the BuzzFeed days. The first one of these I ever did was at BuzzFeed, and it was called our Royal Baby newsletter. It was tied to the birth of George, who's now like, it feels like he's got to be like 10 or something now. Every time I see a photo of that kid, I can't believe there was a moment in time where I had an email template that we designed that was like, the royal baby is here and his name is X, and we had to like hit send. And for 2 or 3 weeks lived in fear that it was going to happen like when I was in the bathroom and we were going to miss it. That was a fun experiment for us back in the day at BuzzFeed, because we didn't know a lot about how to like launch and grow an independent kind of product. And the Royal Baby newsletter gave us a really good excuse to figure out like, how do we grow a newsletter if there's not a vertical or a section tied to it? It's a cool little experiment. So this could be a fun way for you to get, dip your toe into the newsletter waters. So we've talked a little about format. We've talked a little about why these are valuable. Let's talk about how to make them really, really good. For me, the best newsletters are utilizing this jobs to be done format. I think you all have heard this sometime already through the course. You'll also see other places talk about the concept as audience needs or user needs. At a technical level, if you talk to someone who is like an audience needs specialist, they'll be like, they're completely different things. I really think they're so similar in terms of mission and goal. To me, they mean really the same thing. What it means to me is jobs to be done is something that helps me think audience first. When I think about launching a newsletter, I'm asking myself, like, what do I know about my readers or potential readers? What do they want from me? What do they need from me? What's the stuff that I can bring to the table that will actually be useful for them? They're going to make space in this digital living room for me. What am I going to do to serve them? What are the behaviors they have that I might want to consider when building up this product? What is going to have value for them that's going to make them say like, yeah, okay, I'd sign up for that. I'd make space for you in my inbox. The more you understand about why readers value a newsletter, the better that newsletter can be. So often when I talk with legacy publications, they'll have something like a daily newsletter, and I'll say, what's the job of this newsletter? They'll go, oh, it's easy. The job is to drive traffic back to our website. That's fine, but we can't have a pop-up on your website that says sign up for our newsletter. It's the #1 way to get back to the website. Like, we have to have a pitch. We have to tell people why they're making time for this. Do we know why someone should make time for this other than we told them it exists? And often the answer is, no, we haven't really considered that. All right, let's go through the jobs to be done exercise and figure out if we can figure out what should go into the newsletter, what each section of the newsletter should be. Are there different jobs that we want to factor in? We know these things might change over time, but what are the jobs to be done that are out there that's going to make this valuable? And we can tell readers, here's why you should sign up. Here's what you're going to get, and then deliver on that promise every day. So for you, the job is the purpose or value. It's this newsletter does X for this reader. Let's talk through some of these more specific categories, because it'll help make it a little more sense when you actually see some of these. There's kind of 5 key jobs to be done categories that are pretty commonly used in newsletters: education, connection, engagement, action, and entertainment. Education. All right, some different opportunities here. Some newsletters, education is around. We want you to be the first to know. Hey, we have a breaking news alert. We want you to be the first to know. That's why you're signing up. That's the value. Sometimes it's around analysis or going more in depth. I really like this example. This is from over a year ago, but this is the Pew Research Center. This was after the Dobbs decision in the US. Everyone in America knew that Roe v. Wade had been overturned. They weren't there to tell you that this news had happened. You were already aware of it. What they were there to do is offer a little bit more perspective and help you understand kind of the next steps. All right, this happened. Let's go in depth and help you understand kind of how Americans were interpreting this news and dealing with this news. Some organizations, this is Global Health Now on the right from Johns Hopkins. They have this lovely newsletter that goes out 3 days a week, and their newsletter has a lot of different sections, but some of them are like these one-liners. Hey, here's what's happening. We want you to be aware of these. They write these blurbs in such a way so that way you can read it, get a little bit smarter, click if you want to go more into the topic. But if you just read this, you get a sense of, all right, I have a sense of what's going on. I have a sense of what's happening here. Excuse me, y'all. All part of the fun of Zoom. All right, connection. Connection is one of those things where, especially for smaller communities, cities, regional products, newsletters, where you're writing for a small community. These are ones where it may be helpful to have a section or part of your newsletter that's all around helping people feel more connected to other members of the community. Like this is a pretty literal example from the Chicago Sun-Times. They have this lovely newsletter. A lot of bad stuff that they have to cover every day in the newsletter because bad things happen. There's crime, there's violence, there's lots of, less than positive stories. And they say, let's close the newsletter every day with the section called a bright one. And let's just highlight every day one nice thing that makes people feel proud to be from Chicago. Cool. You may say we want to amplify local voices. I have an example of that in a second. We may want to just make people feel good about living in this community or being part of this community. Fabulous. Maybe connection is part of the goal of your newsletter. Maybe engagement is part of it. I love how the Wall Street Journal has done this over the years in their 10-point newsletter. Here's a question. We want you to write back to us and share your feedback. How do you feel about X, Y, and Z? And what's super fun is they then share the feedback in their newsletter the next day. It starts a conversation with readers. They get to see how other readers feel about a certain topic or issue, which is super fun. Some newsletters around action. This is a cool one. This is Jack's Today in Jacksonville, Florida. When I started working with these guys, they said, we want people to be informed, but we also really want them to do something. We want them to read what's happening, and then we want them to show up at city council meetings. We want them to vote. We want them to be engaged. We want them to volunteer. Can we do that in the newsletter? Yeah, we can. So they have a get involved section because that's part of the mission. We want you to know what's happening. We want you to go out and be active in the community. Some newsletters are around getting people to try new things, to do stuff. Fabulous. There could be an action item as part of your newsletter. And lastly, maybe part of your newsletter is around entertainment. We want people to find stuff to do. We want them to get a good deal. We want them to save money. When I first moved to New York City, 10 different people told me, oh, you have to sign up for this newsletter in New York called the Skint, S-K-I-N-T. It helps highlight things twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, free and cheap stuff to do in New York. It's fabulous. Readers, the funniest thing about it is 10 different people told me about it. They all had the same pitch because the Skint has a really good job to be done. We help you find free and cheap stuff to do in New York City. And they deliver on that promise. I've been a subscriber for 12 years now, something like that. They help you get more out of local life, which is really, really fun. And that's the mission of their newsletter. Some people, it's the whole thing. Some newsletters, it's part of it. Let's show some specific examples of these. So Backscoop, this is a really fun newsletter. They cover tech and business in Southeast Asia. They launched a year and a half ago and have built this into a really impressive audience. Super fun. And it does a couple jobs. One is it looks a lot like some of these morning brew types of newsletters where they explain the basics. Here's what's happening. You'll discover some stuff that you wouldn't otherwise see. Southeast Asia is obviously a pretty big part of the world, so it would be easy if you live in Vietnam to miss what might be happening in Hong Kong or in Laos. Great. We'll help you surface some interesting things. The other super fun thing they do is they help amplify voices in their community. So they do this icebreaker section where they highlight people who are doing cool stuff. And they just say, every day we're going to highlight new people so you get to meet members of the community and maybe hopefully connect with them and get them to feel more connected to this overall community. I really love Duffel Blog. They came through this program a couple of years ago. Paul has done an awesome job with this. It's the Onion, but for the military community. What's so interesting to me about this newsletter, there's an entertainment purpose like there is for the Onion. Hey, you're going to see silly headlines and laugh. But there's something that's I've really been amazed by in talking with Paul over the years. There's also a larger community behind this, because the people who read this and like this are largely people who are serving or have served in the military. And so he actually, in addition to just sharing funny headlines that make people laugh, has a community building aspect as part of this. His readers feel more connected to this community they're part of as a result of the newsletter. It's part of the reason why he's asked people to support the work, and his newsletter has worked in a way that like a membership program for the Onion might not, because people feel a little bit more connected to this community. Growth in Reverse. This is a fun one. This one launched this year and has grown amazingly. Chanel, who writes it, has done an awesome job with it. What I love about this newsletter, it's a newsletter for people who make newsletters and are trying to figure out, like, how do I grow? How are other smart people growing? And so she delivers that every single week. It's a deep dive. You're going to go super in depth into like how smart people had success in growing their list. And you're going to find a couple new things to try. So if you're signing up, you're a practitioner in the space who's trying to get smarter and trying to find new ideas. Chanel's newsletter might help you find those sorts of things. Super clear job, so it works. One more. This is from a newsletter up in Vancouver, Canada. Vancouver is awesome. Is this newsletter called Forking Awesome? This is a really fun one too, just because of the format. It's designed kind of like a menu. It's a newsletter about restaurants. There's the appetizers, small bites, a main course, a little dessert kind of thing. And the goal really is, hey, we want you to be a trendsetter. We want you to be the first to know about new openings, things that are happening, where the cool new places are to go. We want you to be the person that all your friends go, how did you know about that restaurant 2 months before everybody else? It's like, oh, I'm on that newsletter list. That's the value. Like, be the first to know. Be the one who knows about the trendy, cool places before anybody else. So there's a specific and clear purpose. There's a clear value. And so the newsletter works because they can deliver on that value every single time. I really think for you guys, you know, a lot of times look at the question, like, how do I know when the job to be done is identified clearly enough? When you can have that one sentence elevator pitch, sign up because X, Y, and Z, here's what you're going to get. That's when you really feel like you have it. Sometimes if you're like, well, I need a paragraph. I need a minute to explain the newsletter. No. Can we get it down to a sentence? Is there a clear thing that we can identify in just a few words? If we're not sure about the job to be done, we may want to survey the audience, ask some questions. Why do you value this? What do you like about this? I just published a thing on Inbox Collective this week all about surveys if you want to go deeper on that. But we may want to ask around things like a testimonial or open-ended feedback. Like, let's see what kind of things people tell us about this newsletter. And then try to identify some jobs to be done from their feedback. And all of this is going to change over time, and that's okay. The job to be done that you have for your newsletter now, for your product now, may be different in 6 months, a year, 2 years. It probably should change as the product evolves. One more example here of just how we put this into play. This is one from a newsroom up in Canada, London, Ontario. They had a weekender guide. They asked the jobs to be done question, like, what do you rely on this thing for? Is it to find good stuff to do? Is it music? Is it food and drink? Tell us. Ask the question, discovered, oh, people told us overwhelmingly they signed up for the newsletter because they want to get the most out of living here. They were then able to update the content, the strategy, and even the marketing language on their sign-up page to reflect, here's what readers said the value was. Here's why people should sign up. All right. So what I want to do is we're going to break into our little groups. This copy of the worksheet is already linked in your course deck. And there's a couple parts of this worksheet. One is listing out all these various jobs to be done that I've identified for you. And for what it's worth, so often when we've done this session in the past, people have come back with their own ideas. Like, actually, one of my jobs isn't listed here. Great. This is not a comprehensive list, but hopefully a starting point for a few ideas. I want you to think about which jobs to be done might make sense, might be a fit for you. And do we have a pretty clear sense of who our audience is, who's going to reach, who we're going to be reaching, what they're motivated by, what they're interested in, what they care about, where they live. And we're going to start just going through, like, writing down the jobs to be done, which ones you want to focus on. We'll come back as a larger group, and then we'll talk about some next steps for this worksheet. So we'll make like 15, 20 minutes for you all to go through, write down some jobs you've done, we'll regroup, we'll share, and then we'll talk about next steps.
Great. And we have a few people out today, so I'm going to combine some of the learning teams. And Dan, you said you want me to do it for 20 minutes?
Yeah, I think let's do it until 11:50. That'll be more than enough time.
Great. Okay, I'll open the rooms, and you have the link here in the chat.
All right, folks coming back. Here we go. So I think we got everyone back. What I want to do, thank you all for going through the exercise, writing down some of these jobs to be done. What I'm hoping someone could do, I'm looking for, let's say, 2-ish volunteers, maybe 3 if you all are really eager, but at least 2 people who are willing to, raise their hand and say, yeah, I'd like to share kind of what it is that I'm working on and what the jobs to be done that I think might be a good fit for my newsletter are. So 2 brave souls willing to raise their hand. Let's open it up to the floor. You can, do the little hand raising thing. Ashlyn, yeah, thank you.
I volunteer, and my voice is also dealing with sickness, so forgive me if something happens there.
Oh, welcome to the
You're
club.
right, exactly. So my platform is I'm creating a TikTok channel that I want to turn into a conversation basically about the upcoming US election. So I want it to be a question and answer forum for people of, I'm going to show you the news that you want and none of the news that you don't, in the effort to alleviate some of the news avoidance and disengagement that we're dealing with news on social media. As of 20 minutes ago, I decided a newsletter was also a good idea to supplement the Ask Ashlyn piece of this, because there was a newsletter idea separately, but I kind of feel like now I need to do both. And with that in mind, I'm really drawn to that idea of, the 3 pillars that would land for me are the education, engagement, and driving action. In the education, obviously, like staying up to date, understanding the basics of what's going on with the presidential candidates, what's happening there, who's a hypocrite, who's not. Oh, it's not in my paper notes, it's in this notes. The be informed, be alerted, aware, and explain the basics. And then on the engagement piece, also starting a conversation, because if that's the idea of the whole platform, is to make it conversational and friendly, I would need that to bleed into the newsletter as well. And then as it relates to driving action, taking a specific action, the lens that I'm looking at it through is to vote. I want people to feel educated when it comes time to vote and to take action to vote. And then also helping others get involved and like spreading your circle, spreading the information that you learn into your circle. And if I am creating this platform as I'm the friend that you come to talk about politics, I want to help you become the friend that other people come to talk about politics.
That's fun.
So that's kind of the general idea. But yeah,
I think too, as you get into this, you may find that certain aspects of that are ones that you really lean into and emphasize. Like, this is really where my unique value prop is. But that's super fun. Something that I like about this too, look, entering a super crowded space, like talking about the election is, there's a lot of folks are gonna be talking about it, but at the same time, you're gonna find that there's such a big potential audience of people who just say, like, I feel left out of part of the conversation. I feel like people aren't speaking to my issues. That's super fun. Love that.
Yeah.
One other thing I'd say is, as you go through, like, definitely look at some of the other people who might be talking about these sorts of issues and seeing, like, how are they positioning themselves and what do I need to do to make sure that I differentiate what I do from what somebody else is doing? Like, do I sound too much like so many orgs? This isn't going to be your issue, but when you look at the larger legacy organizations, publications that are going to cover the elections, like they'll have the same tagline for like why you should sign up for their election newsletter. Okay, well, like what differentiates you? And for you, it's just like, okay, how do I make sure that mine sounds a little bit different? Mine seems unique. There's a really clear reason why you should talk to me, why you should be asking stuff of me. That's fun. Thanks for sharing. Feel better too.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, same to you.
Ryan, saw you raise your hand. Let's go.
Yeah, I figured I'd try to give this a shot. Similar to Ashley, I feel like entering this. I felt like I was encouraged already before to start a newsletter for some friends around what I do, but then I think it was around the couple slide of everyone should start a newsletter was the kind of the one for me. So my project, right, is an app for Slack called the SEO. It helps newsrooms with SEO best practices. It's been out there for over 8 months. And yeah, and the idea of a newsletter was trickling to me before this, and kind of the jobs I think through in terms of how a newsletter would help. That product would be, right, educate a user on how it works. I was when you talked about I'm gonna forget the name exactly, but the thing with the C, how you kind of like build like initial like couple of different emails that you can kind of go through. But that was a thing about
Oh, the
how it
course.
works. Yeah, of course, duh. Yeah. So there we go. Right. Inform them of use cases from other organizations or success stories, raise awareness of other aspects of the app maybe they haven't used yet, like showcase data that hasn't been publicly released, showcase media efforts, because I always got to put my face out there now, which I've learned, encourage and engage users for feedback, and then encourage following on like social channels. Those kind of things I was thinking in terms of like how you build that usage in terms of build that newsletter as an aspect of kind of further usage.
Love it. And I'll say on the note of courses, like yours is a great example of a newsletter that would work really well as a course, like launching, for instance, in January, a like 10-day SEO checkup newsletter. It's like, look, trying to get your SEO and your site in shape for this year, there's a lot of things to do. So instead of producing some like giant guide with a million, things to check off your list that you're not going to get to, like, we're going to break things down day by day. Like day one, we want you to do this. Come back tomorrow and we're going to have another task for you to check off the list. People get the chance to like, yeah, I did it. I checked this. I improved this. I feel a little bit better. Like slow incremental progress. Yours would be a great case for a course.
And if I don't mind me asking, bless you, but what is the best platform to start a course, or is there one preferred versus another one? Sorry, I know.
Great question. Hang on. This leads really nicely into, okay, I'm gonna get to that in 1 second. So 2 things. One, thank you all for going through the workshop. We're almost at time, so we're going to get through this. Next couple of days, there's a part 2 to go through and be like, all right, I wrote down a bunch of jobs to be done. Which are the ones that I definitely want to focus on? What do I know more about my audience? Do I want to take a crack at building out a sample newsletter and saying like, what I like to do with a test newsletter, or maybe take an old newsletter that you've already written and say, all right, well, these are the things that I said that I wanted to do. Can I clearly identify them within this newsletter? Like, are these sections, are these jobs to be done clearly identified? I said I wanted to inform people. Did I do that? I said I wanted people to go deep on a certain topic. Like, am I doing that in here? And if not, how do I add something to do that? On the note of different platforms and things to use, 2 things that I will share. These are articles that I've written on the Inbox Collective website. One is on newsletter business models. Between now and next time, take a look through these. I talk about 5 different types of business models. Take a look and see like which one you think might fit with your newsletter. Are you more of an expert, or more of an analyst, more of a writer? Take a look and see which one fits for you. We'll start next session by talking through that. And on the note of newsletters and automations, I go into that on some of these. So some of these platforms, like for instance, Substack doesn't have an automations platform. You can send a welcome email, but you can't set up like a series of, sign up. And so that would eliminate that pretty quickly from the list. Same thing for Ghost. You'd have to go kind of and do a little workaround. But take a look. I talk about automations and what may make sense, which format, which newsletters make sense for different type of newsletters. Happy to answer questions about any of those in the next session. And next session, we'll talk about revenue. We'll talk about writing a welcome email. We'll talk about growth. We'll talk about some best practices. And also by then I'll be like a person again who can like talk and chew at the same time and not sniffle and stuff. It's going to be great. You guys are going to see a newer and better version of Dan rising like a phoenix from the ashes by Tuesday.
Thank you, Dan. And as homework for that session, you want them to finish filling out this worksheet, right?
I want you to finish the newsletter and get at least 100,000 subscribers by Tuesday. Otherwise, don't come back on Tuesday, all right? If you just finish the session now and finish the worksheet, that would also be fine.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Jeremy, any closing thoughts, or should we just leave it there?
We're good. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Umbreen. Thanks,
Okay,
everyone.
so I dropped that weekly check-in link. Please go ahead and fill out the feedback survey. Just take a minute before you go on to the next thing and have a great weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, y'all.